outside of Oak Park and Evanston, where there are local mask mandates imposed by the health department and the socialists in charge of those enclaves. That also includes Chicago.
Right.
Yeah. So, no, Chicago is not mask optional.
Right.
Yeah.
We're not.
because
This
there's
is Lake County and Cook County.
There's a local health order there too, but I just want to make sure that's clear. And there's also a petition being circulated by parents in the Archdiocese, archparentschoice.com against the mandates. There's about 4,000 signatures so far, so if you want to sign on to that.
And my friend just she sent me a copy of the email she sent to the principal at St. Ignatius, and she's done. She's pulling her daughter out of St. Ignatius at the end of the year.
We'll talk a little bit more about St. Ignatius at the bottom of the hour, along with audio you have got to hear from the Algonquin District 300 meeting. So stay tuned for that at the bottom of the hour. One other programming note, or updating stories we've covered. The principal that was fired at Queen of Martyrs grade school in Evergreen Park, who spent the better part of half a century serving Catholic school families in the city. There are more protests coming about his firing, including flooding Mass there on Sunday, I'm told. So
Good.
People rallying for Doc Mathias, as well they should. We'll pick this up at the bottom of the hour. But right now, I think one of the things that thought leaders within the conservative movement need to do is chart a course for where does the conservative movement, which informs the Republican Party and policymaking, where does it go coming out of the pandemic? And let me give you an example of the kind of people the conservative movement and the Republican Party, by extension, better make sure it represents if it wants to be a majority governing party. There was a Vax Pass protest led by New York City municipal workers. They marched across Brooklyn Bridge. And here's one such municipal worker, John Mooney, explaining why he was there.
I'm fully vaccinated. I'm boosted. I even had cancer 3 years ago. Chemotherapy, surgery, everything. I'm fully vaccinated. But I don't want to be segregated from the unvaccinated. There should be no mandates. Workers should not be fired. Union members have to stick together. Unity, not separation. That's why I came in today with my vaccination card. I held it up and I ripped it up. Hashtag rip it up. Rip it up. Rip it up. Rip it up.
For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Kevin Roberts. He is the president of the Heritage Foundation. Kevin, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Oh, thanks. Hashtag sign me up for that, Dan.
Yeah, absolutely. And congratulations on being named, recently being named the president of the Heritage Foundation. So what about this sort of the future of the conservative movement and how it folds in and explains and charts a course forward coming out of the pandemic and all of these disastrous lockdown and mandate policies?
Well, it starts with what you just summarized, and that is we have to frame all of this angst over the vaccine passports, and I would put both of those in quotation marks because it's just a jab. It's a very ineffective shot at that, as being a battle of non-elite regular Americans like you and me and your audience versus self-appointed elites. And of course, we're told by these self-appointed elites, Dr. Fauci, I say this as a Roman Catholic, your cardinal who has been totally misguided on this, that we darn well better listen to them. But the good news is that not only have Americans, but conservatives throughout our entire history, our shared history, have said enough is enough when these elites try to centralize power. And so whether it's on coming out of the pandemic, or whether it's on education or on healthcare or on big tech or on immigration or on foreign policy, the American people are telling us what we need to do, and it is to draw a line in the sand and tell the elites to get back in their box. We're going to define for them as conservatives what the boundaries of their box is.
And it seems, too, that conservatives' healthy skepticism about government has more appeal than it's ever had, and it perhaps prompts a conversation. now that we understand the expert class isn't nearly as expert as they pretend they are, or maybe some of us thought they were, now we start to talk about, what are the things that government should do, and what are the things that government should get out of the business of altogether?
Well, great question. We got to get back to the understanding that the primary purpose of government, in fact, I would argue as a historian of early America, the only purpose of government is to protect and promote our rights in this natural law tradition. And so, yes, there's a role for government, in fact, a duty of government to make sure that it's protecting our sovereignty, our national borders, whether that be foreign invasions or whether it be very related questions like the open border policy of the current administration. We are promoting our rights by making sure that whatever investments we're making as a civil society in public education, for example, actually go to transmitting first principles from generation to the next. We're not only not doing that, we're doing the exact opposite. And so what I'm telling people here in D.C., offering the members of Congress, because keep in mind, Heritage is sort of the representative of America behind enemy lines, if you will, is that it's not enough for you guys and gals to just run on conservative policy ideas about restricting the overreach of government. When you come into office, when our side is likely to be in the majority a year from now, expect the Heritage Foundation and all of our grassroots friends, including you around the country, to hold you accountable to govern like that. Because what's going to happen is that if our friends who come into the majority next year, in all likelihood, decide that they can sort of hoodwink us on a couple of these issues, we are going to have an ideological rebellion inside our movement. And Heritage is trying to be on the front end of that, making sure we're not only talking about the right issues, but have a plan for governing on them.
And the sort of the policing inside the perimeter that you're talking about, it's so important. The statement that Kevin McCarthy made a few weeks ago didn't get a lot of attention, but I thought it was a great signal. And it's going to, some members of Congress and some conservative think tanks may view it a little bit differently, and that's okay. It's okay to have people feel a little awkward about something and then hash it out. But his statement that the Republican Party is going to decouple from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, I thought was a big one. Not because every big business, every Fortune 1000 business is bad or they're all woke, but, I mean, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has made some terrible political decisions. There are too many of its members that have too much influence and do too much rent-seeking. And I think if you want to be a credible messenger to say, as you said at the beginning, we're going to be for Americans who play by the rules against elites who think they can rewrite the rules at their leisure, then it seems to me you have to take on some people that may have been allies from time to time.
Well, that's right, and we're seeing a pretty significant shift in some of the we're seeing the Chamber of Commerce over the last 5 to 10 years move out of the conservative movement and frankly be left of center. I mean, I can tell you, Dan, in my previous role leading a state-based group in Texas, it was the Chamber of Commerce who was one of the most vocal opponents to school choice of all things. Yeah. It was the Chamber of Commerce last year in Texas that was promoting Medicaid expansion, which actually diminishes health care and access for people who need indigent care. All of that to say, it's gratifying to see Leader McCarthy recognize that and also signal to the movement, we can be comfortable with this. And you know what? We don't have to be ugly in our rhetoric about it. We can maybe look forward, and because of this rejection by us, the Chamber of Commerce comes to their collective senses into the movement. But it's going to be on our terms. And it's going to be on our terms because the principles that animate the policy we want to work on are principles that endure from one generation to the next. That's the root of conservatism, and it's really great to see significant people with significant profiles politically, like Leader McCarthy, talking that way.
One other, you recently, the Heritage Foundation put out a white paper on big tech, and so again, thinking about what are we going to do, what is the Republican Party going to do if it were granted the reins of power in Congress come November and then obviously January. There's been a lot of talk. There was a lot of talk in the run-up to the 2020 election about big tech and its overreaches. There were hearings, and you brought our colleague Dennis Prager and Robert Epstein to talk about his research on Google and so forth. But then, nothing happens. There's not agreement, and then and so nothing happens. So, how should Republicans and conservatives be thinking about big tech, and what should the policy agenda be, again, if they are in a position to make it?
Yeah, we have to understand that now is the time to put policy solutions in place after the last year or so of really good rhetoric, really understandable frustration. And that's the role that the Heritage plays, is first acknowledging that this is a problem, diagnosing it, and then coming up with a series of solutions. And so this paper that we issued on Monday is a significant step in that direction. And just to put it concisely, Dan, we need to shine light on the practices that the biggest of the big tech companies keep in the dark. We need their algorithms. We need to take antitrust action on them. And on that point, I will say, as a lifelong conservative who loves the free market, we understand that 98, 99% of the time, because of the virtue of most people operating as free market folks, we don't have to worry about antitrust action. But these companies are using that freedom that exists in American law against us, using our private data against us. And we understand, to go back to one of your earlier questions, that one of the proper roles of government is to keep that in balance. And so what Heritage is trying to do with that paper is signify that, or lay out, this is the set of steps that have to happen. There has to be transparency because, frankly, as I have said, and I don't really use rhetoric like this often, I think those big tech companies are enemies of the people. And we see evidence of that every single week. If we don't get control of people, whether as conservatives or liberals, then I think our ability to have conversations like this in the public square will be limited in the future.
And the prospect of Roe v. Wade possibly being overturned and returned to the states before the current term is up at the end of June, the cultural agenda, the moral agenda the conservative movement needs to have. If we're just about economics, then we're not really conservatives, are we?
No, that's right. I've told people for years, look, let's not put an adjective in front of the word conservative. It has always been a majority movement in this country. There are some folks who are going to emphasize the fiscal issues, some are going to focus on the social issues, but they can all be under the same tent, and they ought to be, because it's ultimately not merely about freedom, but about flourishing. And so if we're not, as conservatives, thinking about being a lot more active in state legislatures once, in all likelihood, Roe versus Wade is at least partially overturned in June, then we have no chance at winning on these other policies, right? And beyond the obvious, Dan, beyond the obvious that we need Americans to be born in order to enjoy freedom, but when we're talking about transmitting values in schools from one generation to the next, that starts with a recognition that first and foremost, as conservatives, our civil society has to be healthy. It has to be a place where people are enjoying freedom, not just for the sake of doing whatever the heck they want to do, but for the sake of being able to flourish because of their God-given dignity. Conservatives can talk about the cultural issues, the social issues, and the economic issues, because all of them point to that human flourishing.
He is Kevin Roberts. He's the new president of the Heritage Foundation. And by the way, I'm really enjoying the Daily Signal outlet that
Isn't it great?
You've created.
Nice.
You had a great story today that we talked about with the latest CDC propaganda based on a phony baloney masks study. And so keep up the great work with the Daily Signal as well as the Heritage Foundation overall. Kevin Roberts, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. Take care.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
You're listening to Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Diabetes, high blood pressure, anxiety meds, everyone's on them. If you're a 50-year-old male, maybe a bit porky, and you may even have type 2 diabetes, $1 million of term insurance may only cost you about $200 a month. Call Term Provider. Speak with Big Lou at 800-555-2085. Big Lou will find a term life policy for you even if you have type 2 diabetes, are overweight, or have high blood pressure. Term Provider has helped thousands of people like you who think they can't afford term life insurance. To buy $1 million of affordable term life for you, all you need to do is call Big Lou at 800-555-2085. Lou will make sure the scales are tipped in your favor. Call 800-555-2085. Big Lou will answer your call and work to fit you into a term life policy that you can afford. Remember, Big